Today we're beginning a project that we're quite excited about. We're going to be creating a new plaster heart, and we're using the mold that we made from the original Pilgrim statue of 1947, which traveled across Canada. Now that heart is actually made of brass, and we're going to reproduce it in plaster. Here's a sample from a previous project, a prototype. You can see the roses across the front, and it is three-dimensional. But once it is painted gold, it's going to look quite striking. Here's a small version of the statue from Our Lady of the Cape, and on the front you can see her heart, which is gold here, signifying her Immaculate Heart. What's really neat about this project is when we complete the heart in plaster and we make it gold, it's going to travel with Canada's Marian devotional movement to a special mass in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, celebrated by Pope Francis. So it is our belief and our hope that he's going to end up blessing this actual heart and leaving it behind following the papal mass. An interesting thing for you to know is that we have a tiny little shard. You probably can't even really see it on the camera, but there's a small shard in this glass which comes from the original statue at Cap de Madeleine. This is a miraculous statue. It's well documented. The statue opened its eyes and has a fascinating story. We will be adding a small chip inside the actual plaster when we make this in two parts, and you'll follow us as we go through the stages of taking the parts and putting them together and creating the final version of the golden heart. Hydrocal plaster is gently mixed with water in small usable batch sizes and then poured into the mold for the front half of the new heart. And two small blessed chips are gently embedded before the plaster starts to harden and cure. Plaster is also poured into the other molds to cast the second half of the heart and both halves of the upper flame. The next day, the pieces are carefully removed from the rubber molds. First the flame, and then the heart with the fragment of the miraculous statue from Canada's National Marian Shrine. The overflow excess plaster on the flame has to be carefully cut away with a Dremel tool, followed up by sanding by hand. The edges from both sides have to be made to fit before they can be glued together. And once that's done, each piece is mechanically sanded flat to better fit into a single piece. Having now demolded both sides of the heart and both sides of the flame, I've glued them together using a simple two-part epoxy. And when it hardens, which will be fairly soon, I will then inject using a syringe. I'll inject some new liquid plaster to fill in the small gap between the two sides. And then the flame will end up fitting on top of the heart, and you'll see that in the next stage. With the two halves of the flame and the heart now fused together and the edges injected with new plaster, that we're going to go outside into the workshop, do a bit of hand sanding here to smooth it all out, and then with a little mechanical assistance, we're going to smooth the edges to make the flame permanently fit on top of the heart. Once the epoxy is dry, the heart and flame sanded with a fine grit sandpaper, sealed with a primer, then painted with a rich yellow base before 3 layers of gold paint are applied. Next, a hole to anchor the chain support is drilled into the back. With the heart now fully painted, we have secured the hardware to the back to hold the gold chain in such a way that it will actually hang flat against the statue. So we put on bumpers on the back, putting it into its packaging and shipping box to make it on its way now to the Papal Mass in Edmonton. Thanks for watching.